Welcome to the Meat and Potatoes podcast. We're here with Mike Peregrina, who is the co-founder, CEO, and president of Homey. How are you?
I'm so good. I'm so excited to be back. It feels like it's been 10 years, but Garrett, I'm so excited to be here.
It's been a whirlwind.
Yeah, to say the least, for sure.
So we're going to jump right in by telling people this is actually going to be a two-part series, which doesn't happen that often because there's a lot to unfold. The story is very cool. You guys have been a key component of the ecosystem, but we're also talking about a huge industry. And we were sitting down before and we thought, you know what, let's just carve this one in half. So thank you for taking the time. We're going to talk about kind of the early years, the visions of entrepreneurship, team building, core values, and then we'll get into the next time we're together, kind of the last 3 years. So
yeah,
stay tuned for that, listeners. Let's start with for those that don't know, and if you drive up and down I-15, that would mean you do not look at billboards. Right?
Yeah.
But let's talk about the founding story of Homey. What do you guys do?
Yeah. So Homey's vision is to make homeownership easy and affordable for everyone. I think, everyone, especially now in this market, is either looking at the news and home prices and interest rates. I think now more than ever, it's a vision worth fighting for. And that's what we're doing day in and day out. Homey is a one-stop shop. So if you want to buy a home, sell a home, from search to signature and from contract to close, we can help you with Homey real estate, Homey loans, Homey title, Homey insurance. So one-stop shop. So it's been pretty fun building that over time. The management team is super committed and great, and it's been a heck of a ride. And I think the best is yet to come.
Yeah. I heard your guys' early pitch.
Yeah.
I was a judge for the TCIP program, and I don't remember what that acronym stands for, but it was run through GoAd at the time. And they had an allotment of money that they would divide up as grants, right? There may have been deliverables that you guys had to show, but I'm sure those were pretty easy. And after you guys left the room, we were debating the merits of every company. And after you guys left, wow, interesting story, interesting idea. Clearly, they're going after a big market, and a lot of the players in the market have sharp teeth and claws, and they have the resources to squash you.
Yeah.
And the consensus was they're either going to implode quickly or they're going to get really big and achieve something great. And we ultimately voted for yes.
That's right. I remember that.
Do that.
Super grateful.
And so it's always fun when you get to hear the pitch in the early days and then watch what happens, right? Because you can pay attention a lot more tacitly and be like, oh, they did a little pivot there, or oh, they're exactly right on the line of what they wanted to do. But that was 8 years ago. 8 years ago, a lot's changed. So for those that are interested in buying a house, whether it's their 10th or their first, there's a lot of options, right? How did you guys in the early days position yourselves in ultimately the psyche of people?
I think ultimately we're selling trust. Buying and selling a home is one of the most important / one of the biggest financial decisions anyone will ever make. And I think we don't get an education on that early on in high school or in college about personal finances and, what's an interest rate? How much is that going to cost? What are the fees related to buying and selling a home? And generally speaking, it's about 6% on the real estate agent side, right? 3% to the listing agent, 3% to the buyer's agent. And then there's a lot more fees on the loan side, which a lot of people don't know, somewhere between 1.5% or 2% for the traditional loan officer to bring in that deal. And then the mortgage bank or mortgage broker gets another, 3 to 4%. That's 6 and 6, that's 12%, right? And then you have title and escrow and home insurance and home appraisal and home inspection. And in some states, there are attorney states, you got to get an attorney over the top to review everything. Start adding those up, that's 14, 15%. And we believe that that's just taking away the hard-earned equity of these homeowners, right? And we just think that's fundamentally wrong. The other piece that we think is a little bit, or not on the side of the consumers, the sort of model. There's a 1099 model, generally speaking, and then there's the broker split model, and then there's a franchise model. At Homey, we said, hey, we want to make sure that we have wonderful employees, full-time professionals, and all of our real estate agents and loan officers are W-2, right? There are 100% all in on Homey. They have, stock options in the business. They have health insurance, and we take care of our homies. And what we like to say is happy homies bring happy homies and make happy homies. So when you're buying or selling a home, on the buy side, a lot of traditional real estate buy side agents say, hey, you don't have to pay me. Don't worry about it. The seller pays the fees. And although technically that is true, they go into a co-op agreement, 3% to the listing agent and 3% to the buyer agent. And yes, the listing and the seller does pay that 6% fee, but the buyer agent isn't free, right? And fundamentally, that's just been this sort of education, uphill battle over and over. When we launched consciously on the sell side. We know that the acute pain is the seller paying those 6%. And we just feel like that's fundamentally wrong. So much technology is out there, so much efficiency to find and discover that home. The real estate purchase contract is fill in the blanks. It's actually approved by the state.
Mm-hmm.
And this is very similar in all the states across the nation. So you literally have to fill in the blank. But you want a professional. You want someone that's doing this all the time. And that's what we did. And that's how we sort of launched on the market, just focused on the sell side. Interestingly enough, the first 18 months of the starting of the business, we weren't the licensed brokerage. We used real estate attorneys, and then we would market the listing on Facebook, on social media and a couple other channels, which was really, really fun and interesting because we got a lot of pushback from the division, from the UAR, from the NAR, at the local, the MLS, Zillow, and Trulia even got after us, which was really, really fun. And then it got a little serious, right? So we had to make sure. So we did pivot and become a brokerage. And in my mind personally, and in a little bit, I'll share my personal story and the sort of founding story and creation story of Homey. I had this huge, just like boneheaded frustration or vendetta, if you will, that Homey would never become a brokerage, and it didn't matter. If anything, it created more trust. Right back to sort of this core concept of trust. That's what customers want, and that's effectively what we're selling, right? And then over time, we grew, and in the first 18 months, we actually became the number one listing brokerage in the state of Utah, and we're still the number one brokerage in the state. So that's been really, really fun.
Yeah. It's always good when you can, like, you mentioned, like, vendetta and all of that, but, like, to come full circle and be like, all right, I'll put away the pistols for now.
Yeah.
And ultimately being the number one brokerage in any state's amazing, right?
Yeah.
And I'm interested in you guys, the founding team probably could have done anything.
Yeah.
Right. You like sneakers. You could have done something in that vein, right? Why did you guys zero in on this?
Yeah. So let me share my story first because, one, I think it's important for people to know why we founded this business. I think even to a fault, we're super mission driven. That's what drives everything we do. And sometimes that's really hard, and you got to do the right thing and make sure that why you're doing things. And for us, that's the mission and the vision and the core values that we put around the business. So I was born and raised in LA. I grew up, 3 blocks away from USC, if you're familiar with the area, on Normandy and 36. Pretty rough neighborhood. I have the scars, physically and emotionally to prove it. I grew up thinking I was going to study architecture and play football at USC my whole entire life. I was like one of those geeky kids at 10 that had a vision board. I just knew what I wanted to do. One of my older cousins was really kind and said, hey, you'd like to draw and art, have you thought about architecture? And from that point forward, I was just obsessed with it. My mother, she's an amazing human, hard worker. That's actually where I get my work ethic from. And she's very studious as well. I think she's 62 and working on getting her GED.
Oh, cool.
Immigrant from Mexico, moved to LA, for the promise of the American dream, entrepreneurship, capitalism, just a much better lifestyle here. She was divorced when I think I was about 8 or so. And you'll notice for me personally in my timeline, the home has always been this big sort of piece on that timeline. And Homey's no different. When my parents got divorced, we did not get the house. We were literally left on the street. And then my mother convinced my oldest cousin, coincidentally enough, the cousin that, sort of turned me on to architecture, and convinced him to co-sign for my mom's first home. She worked 4 jobs. We'd wake up at 4:30 in the morning. We'd do the LA Times news route. I got dropped off at 5:30 in the morning to go to the San Fernando Valley to go to junior high and high school, which saved my life, literally and figuratively. Got me out of drugs and crime and gangs, about an hour and a half each way. And then she was a seamstress. She sewed and had a sewing machine in my bedroom, which I resented for so many years because I also didn't get a lot of sleep. Um, but she worked really hard. She picked me up from the bus stop around 5-ish, 5:30 or so sometimes. And then we'd pick up produce from my aunt's produce shop in South Central LA, and we would load up the back of the 1991 white Nissan pickup truck and run through neighborhoods or drive through neighborhoods selling produce in the back to make ends meet. And then we'd come home, she'd make dinner, we'd do homework, and then she'd continue on sewing. She'd bring garments home and we'd help pick them. She'd give us like a nickel or something. And then she worked through the night. I never saw my mother sleep. She's an amazing human. And then my mother remarried. But prior to that, we realized even working 4 jobs, we couldn't afford the home. So we actually lived in the garage. Lived in the garage for the better of 2.5 years. No HVAC, no plumbing. We had to do the schedule with the renters in the main house to use the facilities, which was crazy. I was a kid, so I didn't really know. But it was my oldest sister, myself, my youngest sister, and my mother. And then my mother remarried. So we moved into the front house, which was really nice. And then we moved from South Central LA to Las Vegas. And it's that equity that we had, that she had in that house in South Central LA, that we rolled over and moved into nice, pretty suburban neighborhoods, no gunshots, no helicopters, no sirens,
Yeah.
which was really nice. And sort of, again, back to that home ownership piece, back to that home was really great. I decided to pursue architecture at UNLV there in Las Vegas after high school. Because it was still a passion of mine, even to this day. And then during that time, this is sort of where I'll weave in the homie creation story. I was putting myself through college by waiting tables on the Las Vegas Strip. Times were great. It's about 2005 or so. Vegas is booming. A large portion of my wait staff started getting their real estate license, and then the other part started getting their mortgage license. You know, they weren't doing this full time. They were doing this part time, as a lot of traditional real estate agents out there are. Part-time. Then I got caught up in the subprime crisis, buying homes 2 at a time, stated income, no money down, 1 year, 2 year arms. Man, my palms are starting to get sweaty just kind of thinking about that. And then we did it again. I was 21 or 22, had a really nice portfolio of single family rentals. And I'm like, this is great. I'm winning. And then 2008, 9, 10 came around, and Vegas, as you know, got hit really, 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 really hard.
Yeah.
And then I lost everything. I lost that home, you know. It's a huge sort of piece in my life that I think fundamentally changed who I am today. And then I moved back into my mom's house with about $200 in my pocket after losing everything. Walked into my room and didn't come out for about 3 months.
Wow.
Then my mom comes into the room and says, Mijo, I need you to get out. I need you to do something. You're young, you're bright, you're smart. You know, don't let this bring you down. She's an amazing human. She's like the eternal optimist.
Yeah.
And then she said, you got to go back to school. You got to do something. And so I started talking to people. Hey, you know, what do you think I should do? You have to pivot careers. So I decided to go back to college, went back to UNLV and studied finance and economics, which was wonderful, sort of using other sides of my brain.
Mm-hmm.
But I've always loved numbers. I love spreadsheets. Everyone knows that. And then I started my career in finance as an investment banker. Did that for almost 2 years. Worked 14, 15, 16-hour days. But I learned a lot, learned the art and the on a transaction, you know, how to do a deal, motivations around the table, reconnected with my now wife, Mallory, who's just an amazing human being, an amazing mother and partner, beautiful inside and out. And that's what brought me here to Salt Lake City. And then I was lucky enough to work at Mercado Partners, a growth equity investor here in town, which was really wonderful, especially being sort of the new kid on the block.
Mm-hmm.
It just opened up this huge opportunity in Rolodex for me to get into the tech ecosystem, and meeting entrepreneurs and CEOs and management team was really, really wonderful. And then went through that process. And then, in the middle of the night, I woke up with this epiphany, kind of re-looking at what happened to me and a lot of people in 2008 and 2009. So I got a piece of paper out, and as I shared earlier, I just felt like the whole system was wrong, right? The franchise model, 1099, broker split, et cetera, and the fees, my goodness, the fees.
Mm-hmm.
And I just felt like there has to be a better way. And this was sort of when Lyft and Uber and Airbnb were making these huge splashes, right? Marketplace, consumer behavior was shifting, mobile phone and mobile apps was emerging. And I said, man, now is the time to kind of go after this idea. So started building a pitch deck, financial model, and sort of what I thought could happen. And then I got introduced to Johnny Hanna, who's co-founder and CEO of Entrada, a real estate software business here in town, which is one of the darlings
Mhm.
of Silicon Slopes. I had heard wonderful things about Johnny. He is an amazing human. He is like the salt of the earth. Google salt of the earth, his face will come up. He is an amazing human. And then pitched him, shared the story that I just shared with you, and then he introduced me to Mike Triunfo, who's our co-founder and CTO. He was the co-founder and CTO at Entrada early days, and then he went on to be the VP of engineering for Domo. Super technical, huge business IQ as well. I actually just had lunch with them yesterday or the day before. And the three of us just came together, and the question was like, what do you think of real estate? What do you think of real estate agents? What do you think of the system? And we all fundamentally felt like it was broken. The fees aren't commensurate with the service, et cetera. The value just isn't there, and it's not centered around the freaking consumer. That's the biggest thing for us. We're obsessed with the consumer. And then one thing led to another, and then I think it was March of 2016, we launched the platform, and then, as they say, the rest is history.
Yeah,
That was long.
I love it. So a lot of people don't have reason to complain. Based on your story, you've gone through a lot. You would have a few reasons to complain.
Yeah.
So kudos to you,
Thanks.
and obviously your mother. She sounds amazing. But for you as a kid to like go through that and like remain optimistic, because even if the parents are optimistic, the kids still need to be.
Yeah.
Because what you went through, I'm racking my brain of all of the kids in my life. I'm like, I don't think they would make it through that, right? So very impressive, and
Too kind.
that whole story is great because it ebbs and flows. There's ups and downs.
Yeah.
It's kind of life in general, and I didn't know a lot of it, so it does give great context of why you guys would do Homey. And I love that what you guys are like trying to solve in the early days and now as well. Most people would agree with you on the business model. If that's the one slide of here's how it is for somebody buying a house or selling a house, and they're like, ugh,
Yeah.
look at all those layers. Wouldn't it be better if there weren't that many layers? And that's part of your business model, right? Like
That's right.
that's easy. It's always good to have that one slide where it's like, do you get it, Ma and Pa? Do you get it, investment banker? Do you get it,
Yeah.
VC? Like, yeah, we all get it. So you mentioned, you guys were kind of flying by the seat of your pants, and others were, because I know you guys were targeted for elimination early on by
Oh yeah.
pick your poison, right? Long-standing industry, this
That's right.
buying and selling of homes. Plus, you had all the new tech platforms. I assume you guys learned a lot about pettiness
Oh
and
man. Yeah.
vindictiveness. With the founding team, how did you guys divide up and conquer who was going to do what on any
Yeah.
given day?
So I think it was fairly clear on sort of our technical competencies. I came from investment banking and venture capital and sort of, number crunching. So when we founded the business, I was a co-founder and CFO. I also had done some consulting and some strategy stuff. So kind of taking a step back and looking how all the things come together. I wouldn't say I was an operator then because I wasn't, but now as an operator, sort of kind of wearing even like a COO hat
Mhm.
a little bit and trying to stitch together the revenue model with the business model and making sure that makes, sense from a unit economics perspective. Mike Triunfo, technical on the CTO side, right?
Mhm.
He's a domain expert there. Johnny had led, I believe, sales and client support and HR. So, around driving revenue and business, that was his expertise. So a little bit different, right?
Yeah.
And that's how we triangulated through everything.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And how did you guys settle disputes internally between you three?
I don't know if we settled. There's probably a couple of them that were like big crossroads in time. One of them, from time to time, it was becoming a brokerage, right? We were getting so much heat from those powers, and I was being super stubborn because of that personal experience that I had where I lost everything because of what I felt was the system
Mm-hmm.
that did me wrong, and in my opinion, other folks as well
Mm-hmm.
across the nation, right? I couldn't let it go. It was almost petty, right? But I was just obsessed. And then we talked through it, and it was like the blinds were just opened up, and it's just like, it doesn't matter. And at the time we had our COO at the time, he was a general manager at Uber, and he told me one day, he's like, hey, do you know that Uber has taxi licenses in Texas and New York, medallions I think they're called.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just, he's like, yeah, no one knows, and by the way, no one cares.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. You could still be disruptive. If anything, it's more challenging to be disruptive within the confines of a box, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, that's real disruption, because there's no playbook for that. And that's like a big dispute where you're trying to take experiences. One of our core values is humility, and you had to be humble. I had to be humble. So just taking a beat and making sure that, like, hey, are these decisions, when you look up at your vision and your mission, are they going to affect the business in a certain way? Do they matter? Is it petty? Is the consumer ultimately going to win because of that? I think that's really helped us sort of, settle disputes and arguments and all that stuff, especially in the early days. And then trust. You have to have a really thick layer of trust within anyone. Doesn't matter if they're an IC or the CEO of the business. There has to be a high degree of trust and respect.
Yeah. The trust is kind of an underlying theme in a lot of industries, and you need to trust that General Motors and Ford and Tesla are going to make cars that'll withstand a crash, right? You need to trust that your house doesn't have asbestos and can be sold, and you won't get taken to the cleaner, and food, whatever, right? Like the brands and the companies that have that trust. I'm glad that you mentioned that earlier, because that's probably the biggest piece of equity.
Yeah, for sure.
For a lot of
doubt.
brands. So a lot of folks have never bought a house, or it was so dumb and painful that they've forgotten how to do it. But a lot of the times it ends up somebody with a shovel and a sign digs a hole, puts the sign in the yard, right?
Yeah.
There's a billion things happening behind the scenes, right? The family has decided to move, upgrade, downgrade, whatever it is. You've already mentioned the layers of people lining up to take a piece of that. The model that you guys have, let's just simplify it real quick, is I want to sell my house, and I'm going to ask the miracle of the internet how to do that, right? If they didn't go with Homey, you've already mentioned fees, layers. I think it probably would take longer, right? Probably more phone calls, text messages, emails. With Homey, what does it look like?
Yeah. There's a lot of great options out there, right? I think if you look at the industry as a whole, it's somewhere around 20% of GDP. I mean, it's a huge industry. Mortgage, title and escrow, home services, the real estate agent commission fees, somewhere like $800 billion or so a year in annual revenues. But the TAM is huge, right? For Homey, we charge you $3,500 flat fee, because we believe that the sell side process is really, really repeatable. And we built some software around that. There's a lot of administrative burden that happens with buying and selling a home, that unfortunately the consumer gets charged the whole commission for some of these things that could be broken apart. So we've created a really beautiful prepare to publish flow where you as the owner can go in and give us the information on your house. Over time, we'll build some AI and make that more simple and more simple and more simple. But right now you go through that flow, you tell us, we take that, we aggregate it, we push a magic button, and all of a sudden it gets disseminated through all the listings, including social media stuff like Facebook, so that we can create more visibility around your home and sell your home for more money and faster, right? You have a listing agent. COVID was such an interesting catalyst, and we didn't do listing consultations before. The real estate market now has changed. And we listened to our consumers, and we said, hey, our consumers want someone in person, We traditionally never done that before, but our listing agent now goes into the home and talks to you, does a walkthrough, tells you about comps, and sits down with you. And that removes a lot of anxiety and pressure, especially in this market, right? But now they're also doing the buy side, so they can tell you about our buy side fee. On the buy side, there's generally a 3% buyer agent commission fee. We're going to split that with you, Garrett, 50-50. We're going to give you half of that commission so that you can cover all these closing costs that add up to thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, right? During that sell side listing flow, when you want to sell your home, Homey Title, because it's under one roof, or an umbrella, if you will, they're going to jump ahead and start pulling title and pulling records and making sure that nothing is going to stop that transaction from going really, really, really smooth. And if there is, we got to cure them. Hey, did you know there's a lien on this for some whatever reason? Oh, I'll pay it off right now, so that it doesn't slow down the process, so it's not a fire drill, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's been really, really helpful. On the buy side, we have Homey Loans and our Homey Loan W-2 full-time LOs, right? And then our Homey Real Estate W-2 full-time real estate agents are talking every single week. Hey, I just got this new buyer, or this seller is also selling and buying with us. I need you to make sure that they're pre-approved, not just pre-qualified. And with rising interest rates that change, gosh, every day, every week that looks so different, we want to get ahead of that. And communication is key.
Mm-hmm.
Communication is a big part of the process. And by having a centralized one-stop shop where communication is almost seamless, creates for a better experience. And that's why what's one of the reasons, in addition to technology that we have, that we're able to charge, so much less than the traditional fees out there. And then we have Homey Insurance. If you get a loan on a house, you have to have home insurance. You have to have it. So why not also be great customer service there and be a low-cost leader there? And everything is bundled in one roof. All the service that you need to close on the transaction are there. And it's fairly easy, and we do our best to remove the anxiety and the stress, right, of selling, grandma's home, or selling the home that you grew up in, right? And now you have to sort of upgrade because your family has grown, or your job has forced you to move. That home that you're buying, we know it's emotional, and we love technology, and we'll continue to build technology. But real estate is also a human business, right? That trust piece, a lot of technology will never replace that.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we learned over time, and taking the best of both worlds, right? Where can technology really, really lean in to make the loan officer, the consumer, the real estate agent a lot more efficient for the transaction?
Yeah. Now it starts to seem like you guys are having a little bit of fun, right? Because
we bring it back to fun.
yeah, because there's a lot of businesses. I've done several hundreds of these where it's like, that does not seem fun. That did not seem fun. I don't know if you're having fun in the future. The end result might be great.
Yeah.
With a monetary event, right? But going back to your original pitch, it sounds like you guys have vertically integrated, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And that's got to be fun as a management team and as a company in general, of like, all right, clearly we can control our own destiny more.
That's right.
If we do that. And a lot of whiteboards and spreadsheets.
Two of my favorites.
There you go. But the end result is like, you have what you have now, and it's a one-stop shop, which is kind of the holy grail for a lot of businesses, right?
For sure.
So I assume if there's a Homey sign in a neighborhood and things go swimmingly for the customer, for free, there might be a few more Homey signs in and around the neighborhood because people talk.
Yeah, referrals.
With words out of their mouth, right? Have you found that to be the case?
Oh, absolutely. And it goes back to our full-time, fully committed employees and real estate agents, right? We obsess over the customer, and NPS is, oh gosh, over 70 something now. And that's been really hard. And trying to scale that as volume increases and ebbs and flows is really, really challenging. But kudos to them. Like, huge shout out to them, because it's because of them that we make a really, really good experience. The number one channel for Homies, for Homey to get new customers, are referrals.
Yeah.
It's number one, which is really, really wonderful.
Yeah. And probably cheap because, put the time in to make them happy.
Yeah, that's right.
And you'd have to be like a pretty big jerk not to like tell your friends that you had a great experience, right?
That's right.
So with Utah being your home base, I assume the first transaction, the first little piece of revenue came from Utah?
Yeah, that's right. We used to charge $500 to sell your home. That was like dirt cheap.
Dirt
That was
cheap.
too cheap, actually.
Yeah.
People didn't trust us.
Yeah. Obviously, there's a lot of other cities and municipalities and
Yeah, hundreds of them.
big world. How did you guys roadmap it, right? Because I get the impression that you see a big old steak dinner. I think your tendency would be like, we're going to eat that whole thing, right? I get the impression. I could be wrong. But so then how did you guys kind of moderate your expansion?
Yeah, it was, it's not been easy. It's been a really big challenge. You got to lean on the management team and employees that you hire, right? Our head of loans, subject matter expert on loans. Head of title, same thing, right? And you have to trust that they're going to flex on their experience and expertise to build this playbook to expand, right? When we started believing that we could expand and it could be nationwide, is one, NPS, customer service, number one. Number two, that referral rate started happening. Number three, the attachment rate of our homie loans business to real estate, homie title to real estate, homie insurance. We said, man, it's working, right? Because you always whiteboard these things and have these huge ideas, but when they materialize for the customer and then for the for homie or the company, and then they start materializing from, unit economics and the financials, it's like, wow, like all the hard work and sacrifices paying off. The way we chose how to expand started with a spreadsheet, sort of this quantitative approach and this qualitative approach. And we pull in, I think it was like 4 major buckets. One, all the real estate data, right? Days on market, median home price, the percentage change, et cetera. The other one was demographics, right? People that use Homey are generally highly educated. They're actually making more than the median household income. They have 2.5 kids, married with children, 2.5 kids. And I think like 30% of them have a master's degree or something like that, which makes sense, right? I mean, you want to be thoughtful about the economics of this huge transaction in your life. That's one piece. And then the other piece is competition, right? We want to be thoughtful, not just like the prop tech or consumer fintechs in the world, the startups, if you will, but also traditional real estate agents, right? In Phoenix, I think it's Maricopa County, there's like 47,000 real estate agents.
Jeez.
That's more per square mile and more per capita than I think any other metro. And that metro is huge. So that was another piece. And then the other one, the cost to acquire a customer, right? How much are billboards? How much digital? How much is radio? All these things, and we weighted them. And you can spend days, literally days with this spreadsheet. And then the qualitative approach is, okay, what do we know? Who do we know in those markets? What are they saying? Do we know a broker? How can we lean on our network to give us some insights? And then we would also quantify the qualitative and put it all together. And then it ranked it, right? And said, here's, from 1 to like the top 45 metros. And then over time, we've learned, right? Like Phoenix, should that have been the number 1 market we launch outside of Utah? Maybe, maybe not, because it's so big and it's effectively 4 huge quadrants, right? It takes 2.5 hours to get from the north point to the south point in rush hour. 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
That's how big it is. It's crazy. So maybe that could have been a different approach, right? What do we know? But at that point in time, we leaned on it. And you live and you learn. Entrepreneurship is a humbling endeavor.
Yeah.
But that's how we came up with where we're going to launch next. And then now we have, we constantly update that every 3 to 6 months with the latest data that we get.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Lots of data, lots of spreadsheets, but a little mix of common sense and a little bit of intuition.
Yeah.
Mixed in.
Trust your gut.
Trust your gut. Because like when I associate homie with a person, they're probably leaning towards libertarian, but they're really good at deals and they don't want to get fleeced, right? So I remember over the course of my life, like when friends would move or, if their family had multiple houses, you could always kind of tell that personality of like, why the hell would I pay somebody to do this? I'm going to do it myself.
Yeah.
Right. And they either did it successfully, even when it wasn't successful, it was still probably fine. Right. Because like they're smart enough to figure it out. But they, they might go down to the library and research a little
Yeah.
bit, or they might call a few friends and be like, all right,
Yeah.
I'm
How do
good
you do
enough.
this?
I can do it.
Yeah.
Right. And my guess is they would be a good client for
Yeah.
Homie,
For
right?
sure.
Because they're like,
Yeah.
these guys kind of think and act like me.
I get everything from a full service traditional real estate brokerage with technology, and I don't even think it's half the cost. It's a third of the cost, you know?
Yeah. Because you could just do 2 columns, right? Should I use Homie or
That's
should I
right.
use, and then
Yeah.
the bottom number is going to be lower,
That's right.
right?
Yeah.
Seems like a no-brainer.
Seems like it is a no-brainer. That's why.
No-brainer. And you mentioned, customer acquisition. Sounds like every third person in Maricopa County is a real estate agent, but in a normal market, you guys have used billboards.
Yeah.
The ones now I think are a play on Clueless, that movie from the 90s, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love big bucks, and I cannot lie. My favorite.
Yeah.
I fell on the floor. I literally laughed out loud when the marketing team came up with that one.
It was a good
Brilliant.
one. Did they get a little bonus?
A big bonus.
Oh,
A
cool.
hug.
Oh, okay. That a boy.
Yeah.
Pat on the back.
Great job.
For me, not working for Homie, but like when people want to talk about Silicon Slopes in general, billboards are actually a part of that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Right now it'd be like people talk about Homie, Capita, every once in a while Domo. So like they clearly work.
They do.
And how do you trace that back?
Yeah. So we tried to gather as much data as possible, and marketing is an art and a science, right? I'm a numbers guy. I like to quantify everything as possible, and then take a breath on it, use your gut, use judgment, soundboard off of the team that we built, that we put together, to make sure we're not missing anything. And then you can't be afraid to fail. You got to give it some time. You also have to understand your business. We have a 90-day sales cycle. If we change something in between, we're probably doing the wrong thing, right? Unless the market clearly says you need to change it now. Rarely does that happen, right? Rarely do the floodgates ever happen all at once. It's sort of this compounding effect. So we have a post-purchase survey that we do every quarter. And the other thing is when you go through our listing flow, one of the questions is, how did you hear about Homie? Number one is billboard.
Yeah.
Number one. And it elevates that trust factor. For some crazy reason, radio and billboard specifically, especially here in Utah, it just increases that trust level. So now for Homie is, okay, what data do we have that can make the cost to acquire a customer go down? 100%. We have to be overweight or weighted higher on the billboard side. And it's working.
Yeah.
It is working. Our head of marketing has done an amazing job of reducing the cost to acquire a customer. And I'm super grateful for her commitment and leadership and courage, by the way.
Yeah. I love it. Okay. I think we have run the course for now. We're going to set the table for the next iteration.
Let's do it.
So you guys also live in a, like all of us, world where there's some things out of our control.
Too many.
Right? And from a business perspective, stuff that can upend any company, I guess, maybe outside of like toilet paper and eggs, right? But even then, it's tricky.
That's a billboard idea right there.
There you go. We're going to, if we just say all these fun words, interest rates, war, pandemics,
banking,
frothy, banking, right? Curveball. That's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah. It's gonna get heavy
next time you're on. Yeah. So we've set the table with like the business model, how it works, the founding story, some of the basics of home ownership and selling a home. And the next 3 years of this podcast will be interesting because there have been a lot of fun things thrown your guys' way. Yeah. And I am genuinely interested in hearing that story. So I think there is a promo code for listeners for Homie. Can you tell us what that is?
Yeah. Silicon Slopes and the community has been so helpful. I've received so many messages and emails, just the love and the support over the last 24 months specifically, but since our inception, starting with you, by the way, TPIC was incredible. That money helped us build the technology that we still use today. That saves a lot of people a lot of money, right? So we want to
Yeah.
give back to the community. So we have a promo code, $500 off your listing fee, SS500, Silicon Slopes 500,
There you go.
SS500, and it'll take off $500 off of the listing fee.
Very cool. Well, thank you for doing that. Looking forward to the next iteration, and thank you so much, Mike, for sharing your story, both the personal and the business side. Very impressed, and kudos to you and your team for still being around right now.
Thanks so much.
Like, I think you guys have a bright future. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.